Hey everybody, welcome to a special early edition of the Hot Seat. I'm Ron Kloffenstein. The Marqués de Lafayette was a French military officer and a politician who was instrumental in helping the Americans win the Revolutionary War. 50 years after that war, he returned to the United States for a grand tour that was described as reaffirming of the American national identity and unity. We're joined today by Leslie Rainey and Theresa McFaden. They're from the American Friends of Lafayette, an organization that's celebrating the bicentennial of that tour, with several events that are happening right here in the Mohawk Valley. Leslie, let's start with you first. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
So,
Good to be here.
So, what is the significance of Lafayette? Who was he? Why does he matter?
That's a really good question. On our website, we have a dedicated website. It's called Lafayette200CNY.org. And on there is a link to the Lafayette 200, and it has 27 reasons why we should celebrate Lafayette. And from a military standpoint and a political standpoint, without Lafayette and his influence in France and his military expertise and prowess, we would not have won the American Revolutionary War.
Wow.
Yes, exactly. And a lot of people don't realize that. Dr. James Kirby Martin wrote a book called Forgotten Allies about the Oneida Indians, our first ally. And I was on a panel discussion with him at the Fort Plain America 250 in the Mohawk Valley. It's a weekend-long event that they have every year. And a year ago, I was on a panel discussion with him, and that was his exact quote. And he said, because when Lafayette came, first of all, George Washington was about to have a mutiny of all his generals.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
wow,
he was. Because, well, they did, first of all, a lot of them didn't want him to be the commander-in-chief because he was older.
Mm-hmm.
And he was very popular during the French and Indian War. And he lost some really significant battles early in the American Revolutionary War. But there's this young 19-year-old Frenchman, an aristocrat, you know, the elite of the elite. If we talk about one percenters, he was in the 1%, right? Mm-hmm. And why was he so loyal? And I thought, I want to learn more about this, because I would say that's the number one quality that I take away from Lafayette is loyalty to General George Washington, who gave up everything, including his health, for the sake of our country. And the other thing is he went back to France and used his influence to convince the king to give money, arms, ships, and soldiers, ammunition, and everything for the cause, because, you know, we're a young country. We didn't have factories making all this stuff. And
England was the strongest force in the world at the time. We did confront.
They were, exactly. And his father was actually killed by the British in Battle of Minden during what we call the French and Indian War, but it was a 7-year war over there. And so he did not have a fondness for the British. And then, you know, the King George decided to raise taxes to pay off his debt from that war. And that's kind of what triggered a lot of what happened.
Yeah.
And then he doubled down on it and then started charging taxes on paint brushes, paper, you know, stamps, everything else. And
so that was really what inspired the Americans to rise up and to have the revolution. Other than like his father's death, do we know what it was that really that interests Lafayette in like America or George Washington, what we were doing? Like, what is it that first like drew him to the United States?
That's another very good question, Ron. There's a book that talks about the fact that he was asked once, what kind of a horse would you like? Would you appreciate? And he said, the horse that'll throw the rider off. He liked that independent
like our spirit.
Yeah, he liked that. He didn't have a fondness for the British. He was from a very long line of military people. In fact, one of his distant relatives fought with Joan of Arc in France. Yeah.
Gosh.
So, and he grew up, the other thing too is he grew up in a part of France, Auvergne, where it was hilly, very mountainous, and he probably played with the servants' kids who took care of their estate and everything.
Yeah.
And there was a moral code back then where if there was a famine, you would help the people that were in the village where you were located, and his family really took that to heart. And so he grew up believing that all people, rich, poor, black, white, red, whatever, they're equal.
Wow,
And
I really
so-
like this Lafayette guy. The more I hear about him,
Yes.
I can see like what he liked about us too. The idea of us being the horse that throws the rider off.
Yeah.
And him being someone who's like, although he's a risk rate, it sounds like he was like kind of a rough and tumble guy who was a good guy.
Yeah, he was. In fact, he heard about this rebellion at a dinner party where King George's brother was talking about it, and he was in support of it, and Lafayette said, I want to go there and help out.
Wow.
And that's really what sparked
He
it
sounds
all.
so cool.
Yeah, and plus, a lot of people don't know that he was a Freemason as well.
Oh, yeah, so am I.
Oh, wow. My grandfather was.
Neat.
And so there's a belief there of good citizenship,
Yes, right.
treating everybody
Yeah.
kind and equal. And I think that just added on to his embrace of that. And he didn't want to be involved in the French court. He thought it was silly, but he played the game.
Yeah,
And when he married his wife, they were betrothed. She was 14, he was 15.
Uh-huh.
He didn't get married, I think she was late 15, 16.
Yeah.
When that was kind of a step up because they were very involved in the French court, and he did use his influence to help
us.
the cause. Yeah.
That is like so cool. So
Yeah.
so I can see why Lafayette was like a rock star in early American days, and 50 years after when he came back. What is it about, other than the loyalty, like what is it that interests you, or that like you find inspiring about him?
Well, the loyalty thing was the very first thing.
That's a big thing, and you really
Yeah.
don't see much of that nowadays too. So I like talking about things.
Yeah,
like
yeah. George Washington and Martha, she had been married before, had 4 children. 2 of them, one died at 17, one at 24, I think. So George Washington, she got married 18 months later to George, and he was the most eligible bachelor in Virginia at the time. And he kind of was a very good father to the children. When he met Lafayette, of course, didn't have a father. His grandfather and
that.
his
His
mother
father
had
had been killed by that.
Yeah,
British,
he was 2 when his father was
Oh
killed.
wow.
And his mother and grandfather passed, so he
Yeah.
became, I think at the age of 5 or 8 maybe, I forget the age exactly, a Marquis. I mean, a very wealthy child.
Yeah.
And when he came to America, he snuck out of France because the king was worried if he actually went with his blessing, England would consider it an act of war.
Wow.
So he snuck
did
out.
it anyways.
Against the king's
He snuck
orders.
out.
Yeah, the name of the ship was La Victoire.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and he was seasick the whole way over. He took the time.
I love
to-
this Lafayette guy.
I know.
He's
There's
so
so
cool.
many people that have man crushes on
I
him.
know,
and
he's
he's
amazing.
like my new boyfriend.
And now,
you know?
like, he escaped from, he had to sneak out of the country because the king would be mad. It's like, that is so cool.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I love him. So he came to America. He landed in South Carolina. He had papers from Silas Deane and Benjamin Franklin. He went up to Philadelphia to the Second Continental Congress and said, I'd like to fight. They go, we would love to have you. However, we have no money. He said, oh, that's just okay. I pay my men myself.
Yeah, no.
Okay, you're a major
Good for
general.
him,
So he gets up to wherever Washington was at the time, presented his papers, and Washington had kind of had his fill of French officers coming for glory and fame.
He probably thought he was a bit of a poser, this
Yes.
rich guy did, to show off a bit, Yeah.
Yes, that's
Yeah.
exactly what he thought. And he's a young kid, oh
Right,
brother,
right,
what am I going to
yeah.
do? And so he kind of took a step back, but he was a very refined gentleman.
Yeah.
And he said, my tent is your tent. And
Yeah.
Lafayette took him literally, ran up, hugged him, kissed him on
Oh,
both
wow.
cheeks. Oh, Geneva, I will be the very best. And he thought he was just like full of it.
Yeah.
But then at the Battle of Brandywine, he got shot in the leg and they're trying to pull him off the battlefield, and he's still directing the troops. And at that
Wow.
point, George Washington's heart fell in love with him like a father-son
He knew he was
relationship.
the real deal. You know?
He was the real deal. And he sent Dr. John Cochran, his personal physician and what we might call the Surgeon General.
Yeah.
He said, John, go stop the bleeding, because the Mennonites couldn't stop it.
Oh.
And he said, and treat him as though he were my son.
Wow.
And
Wow.
John Cochran is buried at Forest Hill Cemetery
Oh,
here
really?
in
I didn't know
Utica.
that. Oh, wow.
So that's
Wow.
one of our noble people buried here.
Yeah. So did Washington and Lafayette were they did they continue to be close after the Revolution?
Yes, they were. They were very close. In fact, one of Lafayette's children, George Washington Lafayette,
nice.
and he named
wow.
his daughter Virginie
Oh my gosh.
Lafayette. And I met when I was in Paris in November. I met Lafayette's 8th great granddaughter, Virginie de Poussey Lafayette.
Oh my
and
gosh.
we marched on the Champs-Elysees to the L'Arc de Triomphe on the eve of Armistice Day, and we laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown
wonderful.
soldier, and I'm crying the whole time
Oh,
because
nice.
this is like, I can't believe I'm touching one of Lafayette's descendants,
Wow.
you know.
Wow.
That's how much I appreciate what he did. for
How
us.
wonderful to think that, like, back then, 250 years ago, that, like, just the idea of, like, what this country was all about, that it inspired somebody so much that he did all the stuff that he did.
Yes.
And I'll bet that, like, him coming over here was inspiring to the American troops, too. That, like, we have this, people coming in to, like, kind of invest.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, and one of the things that he perfected was he had a small group of soldiers, and they would go in quickly, do maximum damage, and get out.
Mhm.
So that was kind of a tactic.
so that's
Special
like something that he,
forces.
like, developed? Like,
Yeah.
it was a Lafayette thing.
He was very successful there.
Wow.
Yeah. And I've read several books, about Hamilton, his wife, Elizabeth Schuyler,
Yeah.
Thomas Jefferson's daughter, Patsy, and different people, and all of them, when you read the little passages about Lafayette, they all appreciated him, appreciated his I think,
his
reasonableness.
spirit I mean, he must have been an awesome guy to hang out with.
Yeah.
I would think.
Yeah.
It sounds like he's amazing. So Theresa, we're going to talk more to you, like, when we come back from the break. But you're involved with this group too, and, like, you're involved with what's going to be happening next week, right?
Well, I'm not involved like Leslie is as part of the.
You're an
group, but
enthusiast?
I'm just supporting it, like, through the Historical Society. Keep talking to my friends and an organization I'm in. I keep promoting it for everybody to attend the events on the 9th and the 10th.
What are you telling people about the events? Like, why should people go? Why is it important to celebrate this kind of thing?
Well, who Lafayette was and what he did is what, it was just outstanding, is all the things that Leslie just mentioned, that we've got to, honor someone in the past for that, and myself being involved with history.
Right.
I just like to always know more and more about somebody that was good in our country years ago.
And do you think that, like, studying about people like this and honoring people like this and celebrating what they did, that is something that's beneficial for people nowadays, because what they did kind of sets an example for how we should be?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yes, it's an example of, reading and, studying about the past of any of these men. You see how they behaved and what they did and how they were honored, and that we should have more respect like that today, which we seem to be getting less and less. But I'm hoping now that bringing out all the character of Lafayette and everything, that it will make us look different.
Yeah, and maybe, like, inspire people to follow
Sure.
more of his example. So we're gonna go to break, but before we do that, Leslie, maybe tell us a little bit about some of what's happening, like, this weekend and on Monday.
Oh,
locally.
yeah. Yeah, so on,
We got, like, 2 minutes before we go to break.
yeah. Well, we have our website, Lafayette200CNY.org. There's an events tab, and you will find something on the 8th at the Hotel Syracuse. It's a ball.
Oh, yeah.
And there will be
yeah.
a promenade. We'll learn some country dances that would have been
Ah.
popular back then.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah, and then on June the 9th, our actual committee for the Oneida Herkimer County, we have 12 events.
Wow.
5 of them on the evening, starting at 4:30 in Rome, New York,
yeah.
and then we have 7 starting from Oriskany, Whitesboro, Utica, Herkimer, Little Falls. So I can go into more specifics,
Yeah, so like
after the
we
break.
have a minute, but like there's gonna be someone who's like gonna be a reenactor.
Oh yes, we
That
have
is
a
kinda
dedicated
cool.
reenactor. His name is Mike Halbert.
Yeah.
And we've been emailing back and forth, and he's learning a little bit about the area. But I will say two things. There are so many things that it's like layers of what
Yeah.
I really want to push forth. I want to make history come alive. I want people to love the history where they live. And we have so much rich American history, the
Yeah.
founding of our country,
Yeah.
a beacon of
Right.
freedom for people. And then also it's America 250 and then the Oneidas. They were
Yeah.
our first ally.
Right,
And that's a
right.
whole nother story in
We
and
have
of
so
itself.
we have so much it's kind of a cliche to say we have so much rich history here, but we really do. And I think like Theresa, we've talked before about, people really do need to like learn from this. We're really lucky that like we kind of like, I grew up in the shadow of the Oriskany Monument. And it's like really like noble, heroic things happen here that like we need to kind of like at times step up ourselves and follow the leads of the people who like made this country exist in the first place and made this country great. So we'll talk more about that after we come back from the break. You're in the hot seat on a Media Monday. My guests today are Leslie Rainey and Theresa McFaden. They're from the American Friends of Lafayette, an organization that's celebrating the Bicentennial of that tour, with several events happening right here in the Mohawk Valley. I'll have this whole show up Friday at unicaphoenix.net/Media Monday. I'll have more after the break. Go back. Oh, hey everybody, welcome to the Hot Seat. It's a special Wednesday edition of the Hot Seat Media Monday. I'm Ron Klopfenstein. The Marqués de Lafayette was a French military officer and politician who was instrumental in helping the Americans win the Revolutionary War. 50 years after the war, he returned to the United States for a grand tour that was described as reaffirming of American national identity and unity. We're joined today by Leslie Rainey and Theresa McFaden. They're from the American Friends of Lafayette, an organization that's celebrating the bicentennial of that tour, with several events happening right here in the Mohawk Valley. So Leslie, during the break, we're talking about like some more massively cool things about this massively cool guy. So Lafayette, he was an early champion of women's rights and anti-slavery.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
He was. It's interesting. In one of the books I was reading about Thomas Jefferson's daughter, she was like his right arm. And he was very pro whatever she wanted to do. He thought women should be allowed to get an education.
Wow.
Women shouldn't be held back. He was very much in favor of women being able to vote and own property. In fact, Lafayette's wife, she bought a plantation in Cayenne, West Indies, and a tree plantation, and set everyone free.
Wow.
To prove that private property ownership was just as profitable as
So
land and
she was really amazing too, his wife.
Yeah. She almost got beheaded during the French Revolution for her stand, because she didn't really like the mob rule some of the way things turned. And her mother and sister were beheaded.
Wow.
And she ended up buying, they were buried in a mass grave. She found their bodies and bought property and interred them in a family grave, built a chapel there. And I've been to her grave, her family's grave, and Lafayette's buried there. But through the doors, because they're right at the very end of the cemetery, there's a big stone wall with an iron gate, and on the other side are 1,200 unknown people buried in a mass grave back there. So they really tried to do what they could for everybody. And they were very much against slavery. In fact, when Lafayette came, while he was here, he kept trying to convince the people we all know, the famous founding fathers, to abolish this any way possible.
Yeah.
And when he came back, he was horrified that it was still a practice. That's why some people do think of the Civil War as the end of the American Revolutionary War. And I'm from a state where we split away from Virginia in the middle of the Civil War for all that. So I'm a little more not real knowledgeable, but
Yeah,
you know,
yeah, had that connection
yeah,
to it.
yeah.
So I can see why this guy was so popular. And I'll bet like 50 years after the revolution, I mean, he was so popular that the president invited him back.
Yes.
What can you paint a picture of what was the reception for Lafayette when he came back and toured America 50 years after the revolution?
Well, he actually landed in Sandy Hook on the evening of the 14th, and it was
Yeah.
very hush-hush, so he could rest. And then there was a banquet. The vice president at the time of the country had a home on Staten Island, and he had a dinner for him, so it was more private. But then he came across from Staten Island into New York City, and on the 16th of August, and he received a hero's welcome.
Wow.
And,
Wow.
and his tour, this is the interesting part, it was only supposed to be about 3 months, maybe 4, go to the original 13 colonies, kind of get everybody excited about America's 50th birthday.
Yeah.
And it ended up being a 13-month,
Oh my gosh.
6,000 mile, 24 state rock star tour.
Wow.
In
Wow.
fact,
he
when-
sounds like a rock star, you
He,
know?
well, he was. I mean,
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
the first time that people had gloves with his picture on it.
Oh my God,
They
that's
they
so
had
cool.
pendants that were drawn with his
I
picture on
love
it.
that.
Unbelievable.
Wow.
I mean, I could tell you the story about Little Falls, you know,
Tell me,
later.
yeah, tell us,
oh,
yeah.
oh God. Well, anyway, okay. So Lafayette came. He's
Love
coming
stories.
west to east, right? And he's in a hurry in June of 1825 to get to the laying of the cornerstone of the Bunker Hill Monument in
Oh.
Boston. That was on June 17th. So he's going from Buffalo and making all these stops. When he gets to our area, he, you know, like I said, there are 5 events that we're trying to reenact
Yeah.
in Rome. So at 4:30 there'll be a Lafayette Trail marker unveiled by Julian Eicher, who is the head of the Lafayette Trail. The American Friends of Lafayette will have Lafayette there, and the executive director of this whole big bicentennial tour, and so we'll have that at 4:30 on Dominic Street. So you can get all the information on our website,
Yep, and I'm going to have links to all that at
LafayetteCNY.org.
americanphoenix.net/renew on Monday. We'll get all that stuff up there. Yeah.
And then, let's see, at 5:30, he'll be speaking at the Rome Historical Society. Beautiful little auditorium, very air-conditioned. You can sit and be comfortable. Then walk across the street to the tomb of the unknown Revolutionary War soldiers. You know, a lot of people don't know we have that
No,
here.
Right, right.
That's huge.
I've lived my whole life going to Rescue Monument. As a child, my grandmother, Lucille Spavin, would take us there. So, like, I know what we have. A lot of people don't realize, like, a Rescue Monument is a great thing that we have right here.
Oh, it is. And then, so...
And it takes your breath away. Like, every time I
Yeah.
go there, it's like, I've been going there for my whole life, as I said. And, like, so as I pull up to it and drive up the driveway or walk up the trail, you just walk and see that obelisk, and, like, you think about what it stands for. And it still takes your breath away, and it's a wonderful thing.
Well, therein lies, I think, some of the contradiction, because we know what happened there.
Yeah.
But if
yeah.
you look at and I'm not to put Saratoga Battlefield down, but
Yeah.
you know, they've been advertising for 2 years, save the date, October 2027 for their 250th commemoration.
Yeah.
But in their pamphlet, they say there was a skirmish near Fort Stanwix.
Oh, but that was the big thing. That was, I mean, to us, that was
What happened there was not a skirmish.
not a skirmish. I was gonna say that was like a big thing. Like the. Yeah.
I mean, it's the bloodiest battle of the American
it was
Revolutionary
kind of a
War.
pivotal turning point too, wasn't it?
It's the first time in 300 years that the Oneida
Yeah.
broke away from the Iroquois Confederacy, decided to side
Yeah.
with the colonists,
Yeah.
and it was a bunch of farmers and regular people
Right,
like us
right,
who
yes,
joined her for her to
yes,
fight.
right, right.
And you didn't have
So
red and
what's
oxen,
Saratoga
you know, to
doing?
get your cannon there. I
So
don't-
why is Saratoga dissing our Fort Stanwix?
But it's not just them. I was watching Outlanders, one of the episodes, and they were at Ticonderoga, and they mentioned Saratoga. I think they mentioned Fort Stanwix. No mention of Oriskany.
Wow.
And if they stopped, because it was almost, they almost wiped everybody out, that they hesitated going in, and when they got down in the ravine, they just ambushed them, and it was
Yeah,
hand-to-hand
it was-
combat.
right.
Then there
It was
is
brutal,
yeah,
yeah.
it was. I mean, tomahawks and machetes.
And like the the creek ran the creek ran red with blood. You know. It's like,
Yes.
yeah. I've written about the battle of Risky so many times. It's like it's hard to imagine anybody not realizing what a big deal it was.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's the work we, as
Yeah.
history lovers and lovers of our area,
Right.
and those who appreciate the
Right.
sacrifice
Yes.
of every
well,
of
before we
people,
go any further, I
you know.
want to talk about another historian person here. Theresa McFaden's here. I'm not sure how much more time we have, but I just want to say Theresa is someone who actually made history herself. She was the first woman who was elected to the Westmoreland Town Council, and she is the woman who was in charge really of our Bicentennial in 1985. We did amazing stuff with that. So Theresa, you've also were one of the founding members of the Westmoreland Historical Society too, right?
Yes.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you did for our town for the Bicentennial, because that was pretty amazing. So get up close to the mic.
Okay. Well, actually,
Theresa's very she's modest, but I always got to brag about her because she's so accomplished. And in my town, she is such a big deal that I'm so proud to be your friend. So tell us about your
well,
Bicentennial.
actually, in 1776, where we had the first big celebration of
Right,
Bicentennial.
the first place for the country,
and,
yeah.
yes, and then there was, it went over really well. We had, probably the biggest parade and everything in Westmoreland. All the other towns contacted us after, so how did you make the contact here? And so we really did. We have, I have videotapes of it that last, over an hour of the parade and everything we have. Anyway, from that, we ended up going in. I took a great interest in history more after that, learning about what the Bicentennial was all about and everything, and learning about James Dean, our founder of our town. And I actually started working with a group that we ended up starting. We just called ourselves the Bicentennial Group, and then we eventually went into
the Westmoreland Historical Society.
Went into the historical. At the time, we were very fortunate to have an attorney in our town that took a great interest too, and so he helped us get us
established all the paperwork.
Through the state. We became chartered in 1980. We became chartered, and we've been an active historical society since then.
Yep.
And which is really good because we just keep learning more and more about our.
Oh yeah.
And now, actually, I reached out even from the Bicentennial to the historical society. Is that I've been to DAR, and I found out that I had a patriot that actually was buried right at Risky.
Oh really?
There. And
yeah.
So I've learned about him, and so now because of that, I've gotten involved with the Revolutionary War, and I found out stories about that I've actually found from Fort Stanwix about my patriot, that how trouble or things that problems that he had in the Revolutionary War and everything. And
what are some
family.
some of the lessons that you like when you learn about these people, some of whom were like your ancestors, and these people went through like awful times, and they survived, and some of them did these great things, or they were part of great things. What are the lessons that we should be learning from them?
Well, a lot of us sacrifice, like my patriot was during the Revolutionary War. He was actually Henry Ritter. His wife died, and he had 6 children, and he left war actually to go back home because he lived outside of in Herkimer, and then then his son went into one of the sons was old enough to fight in the battle and came, and then afterward Henry went back and fought, and then of course he was killed at Risky. And so just learning all that is really made me take more and more interest in our town. And
so what is it about sacrifice that we should learn? Why is it that? Why is the willingness to sacrifice? Why is it the willingness to sacrifice for a cause? Why is it important? I sort of feel like these are the kinds of things that we should be learning from history, not just because it happened, but we should think, yeah, we should kind of do that thing too.
Well, actually, we should be thankful for what we have, because they had to fight for what they wanted, and we don't have to go to war individually to fight for what we want. We should just have more respect for what we have in our neighbors, and we just, be more respectful, and also try to do more for our country, and not only on the looking at the country, also is your town.
Your
There's
town,
a
too.
lot of
Yeah.
people today aren't doing the volunteer work that people used to do. I mean, you're not expecting somebody to go and serve in the military always, but there's a lot of volunteer work that you can do right on the town level, and people are getting it's less and less volunteers, and you really got to respect
And
those
that's kind of
that
where
do
the
volunteer.
lesson of sacrifice comes in.
Yes.
And the lesson of Lafayette too. It was really about like committing yourself not just to your own furtherance, but to an ideal, you know? And so Leslie, tell us a little bit, I'm not sure if we're going to go into the next segment or not, but why don't you tell us a little bit before we close out this segment about some of the overview of some of the events that are going to be happening this coming week.
Yeah, I mentioned Rome on the evening of the 9th. On the 10th, we have 7 events. It begins at 9:30 in Oriskany, where the school children will meet Lafayette, and the mayor will give a proclamation. Then at 10:30 costs $22, but is a breakfast at the American Legion in Oriskany. Lafayette will speak, and it will be period breakfast. So it'll be food that would have been served.
So what
in
kind of food would that
1825.
be? So what would they eat
Ham.
exactly? Yep.
Eggs, of course.
Yep.
French toast.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That'd be perfect for Lafayette,
Fruit,
right?
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And then he will go from there, and at 12:30 at the Village Green in Whitesboro in front of the old courthouse, Lafayette will be there, and he will meet Mrs. White. We have a DAR daughter reenactor who will play her part, Mrs. White.
Mrs. White, she would be like the wife of the founder of Weiss?
Yes. Now he was a comrade with Lafayette, but
really?
he had passed away.
Wow.
Yes, and when Lafayette came here for the Indian Treaty in the 1780s, he did meet with him, and then when he came back in 1825, he had passed away. So he met with his wife, and then Lafayette will get on a six horse-drawn carriage. I've met the horses; they're beautiful, and he will take a carriage ride from Whitesboro into Utica. Wow. George Washington Lafayette, his son. We have an actor to play that part.
Yeah.
He'll be there. But before they do, the children at the Catholic school there will come out and meet Lafayette and the horses. Yeah. And then they'll go into Utica with a police escort, some Masons, some veterans. And he will arrive at 102 Lafayette Street at the Doubletree Hotel by Hilton, Utica.
Oh, it's like so like what used to be the Hotel Utica downtown.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Lafayette Street. Yep.
Yeah,
and
he will.
So that's why it's called that, I guess. Right?
Yeah, right
I never
on
thought about
Lafayette
that.
Street. So no better place to meet. And then he will meet the mayor, our county executive.
Wow.
I hope Manion will be able to make it. Marianne Buttonshone.
Yeah.
And then Ray Halbritter from the Oneida Indian Nation will be there.
I love that connection with the Oneidas. You know that like they were an early ally and he was an ally, and you know it's like one of the great things about not only do we have the history here of like kind of like the glorious history of the battles and stuff, but like that wonderful history that like this area was kind of founded on the coming together of the Oneidas and the settlers, and that's a great foundation for us to like remember that we have that, and that kind of like we should think of ourselves as having been built on that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
when you think of the Battle of Oriskany, Hanieri and his wife, 2 kettles. Hanieri was raised by Dutch Germans.
Yeah.
And so he was familiar with the ways of the white people. And then Chief Shenandoah converted to Christianity with the preaching of Reverend Samuel Kirkland, who learned the Haudenosaunee language and translated the Bible.
Commercials. Maybe so in the next segment, and if we are, we can talk more about this, and we'll talk about James Dean too. James Dean is a cool guy with the United. So okay. Oh, we have some more time. Okay. Well, why don't you give us a little bit more information on where to get more information about the tour? What is your website?
Lafayette200CNY.org.
200CNY.org, and there's going to be most of the events locally are going to happen this weekend, and they're all like reenactments of things that he did 200 years ago.
Yeah, we're trying to reenact it as true to form as we can. at the Hotel Utica. That'll be Tuesday at 2 o'clock.
Okay, that's Tuesday, 2
Yeah.
o'clock.
So all of our events are Monday afternoon at 4:30 till the evening in Rome,
Uh-huh.
and then 9:30 in the morning all the way to 8 o'clock in Oneida Herkimer County. So at 2 o'clock at the Hotel Utica, he will meet Ray Hallbritter. He will also meet the granddaughter of John Adams, our second president.
Oh, really?
And her
Wow.
uncle was John Quincy Adams, and she lived, Abigail Johnson is her name,
Yeah.
and she lived where the Gold Dome Bank is in Utica.
Oh my gosh.
He sold his home so they could build the bank.
So, like,
she's going to
you-
meet Lafayette.
So like you found someone to act out the part of this person who was like an actual Utica?
yeah, they're going to just meet, greet,
Oh
and
my
you know,
gosh,
I'll
that's so
introduce
cool.
them and all that.
Yeah.
And then the other person will be the tallest man in the Army, who's buried in Augusta.
Who's
Is
that?
Amos Parker.
And
Amos Parker.
And how tall is this guy?
He was about 6'10", but he was massive. He was a big guy.
And I'll bet, like, 6'10" back in the Revolutionary War was like a lot, even bigger than like 6'10" now, which would be impressive now. But,
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Back in 1776, guys were probably about like 5'6" or something.
Yeah, 5'7",
5'4".
yeah, whatever. And he was at a redoubt with Lafayette
Oh,
in Yorktown towards the end of the war, and they were trying to remove the fence, and they
Yeah.
couldn't do it. And Amos Parker came up
He
and
was so
basically
strong.
lifted it up, but he saw a sniper, and he shot him dead. And there was a do not shoot order, so one of the troops told on him,
yeah.
and he was being court-martialed. And then the truth came out as to what actually happened, and they
Yeah.
dismissed everything.
Oh, that's
But when he meets Lafayette and tells him this, because Lafayette didn't remember who he was, he told him, and they hugged and kissed and cried. It was quite moving.
Lafayette is so amazingly cool.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So we're talking to. So this hour, I've been talking to Leslie Rainey and Theresa McFaden from the American Friends of Lafayette, an organization that celebrated the bicentennial of that tour. Several events happening right here in the Mohawk Valley. Theresa McFaden is also from the Westmoreland Historical Society, and I think you should come back on the show sometime, Theresa. And we should talk more about the Westmoreland Historical Society. Would you do that? 'Cause
Yes, that'd be great.
I keep telling Theresa to come on the show, but she's kind of shy. So I'm going to tell her right on the air. Theresa promised me on the air she'd come on my show. So we're going to talk about Westmoreland Historical Society. So I
Thank
think
you.
in the next hour we're going to have Cassandra Harris-Lockwood come on with Hatsi. I'll probably be sticking around. But you can see all these great events about Lafayette. What an amazingly cool guy. You see all this stuff about him? I'll have it on our website, unicaphoenix.net/Media Monday. I'll get it up for you on Friday. I'm Ron Klopfenstein. We'll have more after the break.